Alexi Luthor was a brilliant scientist of uncertain origin that used his intellectual prowess to conquer several small European nations before the start of World War II. He attempted to plunge Europe into war by foiling a peace conference, constructing a massive flying city to oversee the entire plan, only to be stopped by the Superman of this world. Alexi became intent on getting revenge on this hero, developing an obsession that bordered on madness. Though many other versions of Lex Luthor are perfectly willing to kill if it suited their purposes, Alexi would willingly allow the deaths of millions if it meant he would be victorious. Nothing else mattered to Alexi, and he would pursue his victory even if it meant the destruction of his entire world. Time after time, he developed many schemes and inventions, all in an effort to defeat Superman and conquer the world of Earth 2. But he failed at each plan thanks to the intervention of Superman. Alexi had a number of near victories thanks to his incredible knowledge of engineering and chemistry, and after Luthor discovered Superman's vulnerability to the element, a meteor made of kryptonite. None of these were able to stop Superman, though, just the same, Alexi was considered one of the most infamous and evil villains of his world. Later in his career, Luthor would discover the multiverse and team up with his counterpart on a planet called Earth 1, a man named Alexis Luthor. They teamed up with a villainous version of Superman called Ultraman from Earth 3, and tried to conquer Ultraman's home, but they were stopped by Earth 3's Alexander Luthor, who would go on to become Earth 3's first and only superhero. Alexi Luthor never gave up in his quest for world domination and revenge against Superman, joining up with Brainiac during the crisis of Infinite Earths. When Alexis Luthor of Earth 1 was given a position of power over Alexi, the Earth 2 villain took offense and objected. In response to this insubordination, Brainiac disintegrated Alexi on the spot. Following the resolution of the crisis, Alexi Luthor was erased from history, forgotten by the people of the new Earth that rose in the wake of this destructive event, only remembered by the two survivors of his world, Alexi's most hated enemy Superman, and the hero's beloved wife, Lois Lane. On Earth 1, Alexis Lex Luthor moved to Smallville with his parents and sister Lena. With his father, a traveling salesman, often away, Lex was forced to live the life of a farmer, which he resented as he dreamed of so much more. As a teenager, Lex became fascinated with a local superhero known as Superboy, who Lex was able to save from a chance encounter with a sample of kryptonite, which nearly killed the superhero. As thanks, Superboy built Lex a lab he could work in, and in turn Luthor began developing many incredible things, including, as part of his growing friendship with Superboy, an antidote for kryptonite poisoning. However, after an accident in the lab caused a fire, Superboy was forced to use his super breath to put the flames out. With a mighty gust of air, a number of chemicals spilt on Alexis, who lost his hair as a result. Blaming Superboy for this, and believing the hero did these things out of jealousy, Luthor swore revenge. At first, he tried to make his revenge constructive, building many wonderful things to impress the people of Smallville over Superboy. But the hero, much to Luthor's irritation, only encouraged such behavior. Worse still, these projects would often go wrong, requiring Superboy to sweep in and save the day. This caused Luthor's hate to deepen all the more, to the point that his family disowned the man, moving away and changing their surname. In no time at all, Luthor was on the path to becoming Superboy's greatest enemy. Many times, Lex was captured by the young hero and sent to Smallville's juvenile detention center. Many times, Alexis was able to get out. This animosity would continue into adulthood, when the hero began calling himself Superman. Relying on an ever-increasing array of weapons and devices, all personally created by Luthor, Lex Luthor engaged in countless schemes to defeat Superman and conquer this world and others, rarely showing an interest or concern for other people, though he did at one time try to seek out and reconcile with his wayward sister. Luthor would work with other villains such as the Joker or Brainiac in order to defeat Superman, and was responsible for the creation of beings such as Bizarro and the terrible Galactic Golem for the same purposes. He also developed his own iconic tactical war suit that he would frequently use in battle against Superman and others. After all, in addition to the many times he faced Superman, this version of Lex also faced heroes such as Batman and the Flash, and even once partnered with his Earth 1 counterpart in a gambit to conquer Earth 3. He was also a member of the very first incarnation of the secret society of supervillains. One incident reveals the true mindset of this version of Luthor at this time. When Lois Lane and Lana Lang were infected by a deadly microbe, Luthor not only refused to help Superman with curing them, but threatened to infect himself with the same microbe, openly mocking the Man of Steel when he saved Luthor from basically destroying himself. Though the women were later cured without Luthor's help, it was a true demonstration of the differences between Lex and Kal-El. Luthor only had hatred and revenge in his heart, while Superman didn't even hate Luthor, and would protect the man just like anyone else. It appeared Lex did have a shred of compassion remaining within him when he saved a terminally ill woman named Angela Blake. He fell in love with her and attempted to redeem himself, working with Superman on occasion and planning to wed Angela. But when Superman approached the woman during their wedding, both of them suddenly disappeared. It was only then that Luthor learned he actually cloned and created Angela and set her up as a trap for Superman, erasing his own memory in order to truly fool the Man of Steel until he approached the woman and both would be sent into some sort of dimensional lock. This plan ultimately failed and Superman was able to escape the trap, and, as he had been many times before, Lex was once again arrested. The incident reveals how far Luthor was willing to go in order to defeat the villain, yet even then, it failed. Frustrated, and without any meaningful connection to Earth, Luthor instead took to the stars and settled on a planet named Lexor. To its people, Lex had long been a divine savior to this world, after they were rescued from their darkest hour. In reality, Luthor simply took credit for a deed he had convinced Superman to do years ago in order to save this world. Over the years, Luthor would occasionally visit this planet as it had become a comfortable refuge, where he got the recognition Lex felt he deserved on Earth. This time, however, Luthor stayed on the planet seemingly for good, marrying a woman named Ardora and having a son with her, giving the boy the same name as Lex. Luthor tried his best to forget about his home and his arch-nemesis, but he could not let the hatred out of his heart. He discovered an ancient laboratory hidden on Lexor, and inside, an ancient battlesuit he was sure would be powerful enough to defeat Superman. When he tried to use it to draw out the Man of Steel, Luthor inadvertently alienated the people of Lexor, though Superman did indeed arrive. Luthor immediately attacked his old enemy with an energy blast, though it bounced harmlessly off Superman's impenetrable body, and instead completely destroyed the planet Lexor. Luthor's wife and child were among the casualties. Though the belief was completely irrational, Luthor insisted this was all somehow Superman's fault. Alexis used a surviving piece of Lexor to build an island on the Atlantic Ocean, naming it L Island and using it as his new base of operations. He made a direct attempt on Lois Lane's life in his first act of revenge, intent on making Superman experience the same loss he did with Luthor's own family. Lois was able to convince Luthor this would not work, however, as at the time, she and Superman weren't even dating. Instead, Luthor drew out Superman by making the hero think he was planning on destroying the Earth the exact same way Lexor was destroyed. Superman confronted Luthor and once again proved superior in the resulting battle. Beaten but not dismayed, Luthor began a slew of schemes after this, including an attempt to capture Superman in Luthor's own warsuit, and another series of evil plans where he specifically went after Superman's sanity. None of these plans worked, and after the last series of schemes came to a head, Superman nearly captured Luthor once more, only for the villain to be whisked away by a mysterious force. It was the work of none other than Brainiac, who offered Luthor an intriguing partnership the villain readily accepted. This was occurring during the Crisis of Infinite Earths, where only 5 universes remained, the rest having been destroyed by a powerful cosmic being called the Anti-Monitor. Luthor and Brainiac gathered villains from the 5 remaining worlds and attempted to take over what remained of reality. Their plans were thwarted by the powerful being known as the Spectre, who convinced the heroes and villains to work together to save reality from being completely destroyed. The villains were sent back in time to stop a crucial event happening on a planet called Oa, home of the Green Lanterns, but thanks to their petty behavior, they failed in this task. As a result, reality was rewritten into one single universe. A new version of Lex Luthor became the only one in all of existence, and the life and history of Luthor would change to accommodate the other versions of Lex Luthor that had once existed in the multiverse. This new version of Luthor was thus remade into a new man on a new Earth. On Earth 3, Alexander Luthor Sr. found a successful career in scientific research and invention. He became famous for his many great works, but otherwise enjoyed a quiet life dedicated to research and discovery. This would all change when an alliance of 3 villains from across the multiverse tried to take over his world. Alexi Luthor of Earth 2, Alexis Luthor of Earth 1, and Ultraman of Luthor's home, Earth 3, entered into an alliance with one another, intent on conquering Alexander's home. With no other choice, Luthor stepped in to defend his world. He sought out the greatest enemies of his multiversal counterparts, the Supermen of Earths 1 and 2. Together, the 3 heroes were successful thanks to a well-built suit of powered armor used by Alexander. The 2 Supermen returned home and Ultraman was imprisoned, while Alexander Luthor decided to become Earth's first and only superhero. Over the years, Alexander served well as the sole protector of Earth. Ultraman and his team of villains, known as the Crime Syndicate, would try to take over the world many times, but Alexander Luthor stopped them on every occasion. During this time, he married a woman named Lois Lane and they had a son together. Alexander's career as a hero continued right up until the Crisis of Infinite Earths. A wave of destruction created by the powerful being known as the Anti-Monitor washed through the universe of Earth 3, destroying everything in its path. Lois and Alexander were only able to save one individual, their son, by placing him in a special capsule that was sent to Earth 1. Earth 3 and all its inhabitants, including Alexander Luthor Sr. and Lois Lane, died, with the latter 2 embracing one another and affirming their love in the final moments before the death of their universe. Alexander Luthor Jr. was born on Earth 3. He was only an infant when that world and his parents were horribly killed during the Crisis of Infinite Earths. The baby was sent to Earth 1 in a special capsule, where Luthor was rapidly aged into a young adult as a function of the journey. The energy from the Anti-Monitor's attack had empowered Alexander with control over both antimatter and matter, giving him phenomenal powers and mental abilities, despite being chronologically less than a year old. Crucially, he became a bridge between the realms of antimatter and matter, a vital trait that enabled the young man to defeat the Anti-Monitor and end the Crisis of Infinite Earths. Only a single universe survived this event, so Alexander offered a few other refugees from the multiverse, without a home to return to, a second chance to live their lives out in a pocket universe, which he said would be a paradise. So he, Superman and Lois Lane of Earth 1, and Superboy Prime all went to this pocket universe, using up what was thought to be the last reserve of Alexander's incredible powers. The 4 refugees found themselves in a realm where they would never age and they could watch over the new Earth that emerged in the wake of the crisis. But something was wrong with this supposed paradise. Lois Lane became sick while Superboy Prime was slowly becoming disturbed at the overall situation. Alexander, meanwhile, grew jealous of his companions, Superman for having a wife, and Superboy for having a childhood, both of which Luthor was deprived of in his very short life before he came to this pocket world. Additionally, Alexander discovered his powers were starting to return. When Superboy Prime grew frustrated with this pocket world, he hit the wall of their reality, the Source Wall, and in response, the new Earth was changed. Seeing this, Alexander came up with a new plan. He convinced Superboy Prime to join up with him and they escaped the pocket multiverse. They began planning an event called the Infinite Crisis, an attempt to remake the universe at any cost. Now free in the sole remaining universe, the New Earth, Alexander and Superboy Prime provoked a galactic war and launched a number of attacks on the superhero community. Alexander posed as Lex Luthor of the New Earth, creating a new society of villains supposedly intent on bringing down the heroes of this world. This version of Luthor also launched an attack on the source of magic itself, the Rock of Eternity, through the use of the powerful being known as the Spectre. Using the society of villains, Alexander was able to create a massive, multi-dimensional tuning fork by capturing survivors of the Crisis of Infinite Earths from lost, destroyed, and forgotten universes that had taken refuge on the New Earth after its formation, and had no memory of their past life on other worlds. This plan nearly worked at creating a new multiverse, but it was not the same as the worlds that had existed before the original crisis. Earth 2, for example, was nothing but a barren husk of its former self. When Superboy Prime learned that there was nothing that could be done to bring his homeworld back, he snapped, rampaging around New Earth and no longer listening to anyone, Alexander included. Luthor's plan was ultimately a complete failure, as his tuning fork was destroyed by the New Earth Superboy during a battle with Superboy Prime. Now truly depowered once again and his plans in utter ruins, Alexander Luthor went into hiding. However, the Joker, who Alexander had viewed as too unstable to involve in his plans, attacked Luthor, furious at having been left out of all the fun. Accompanying the Joker was Lex Luthor of the New Earth, who said that Alexander underestimated the both of them, and it was his biggest mistake. Lex Luthor took Alexander's corpse and modified it to resemble himself. He used this to clear his name, saying that Alexander had impersonated him for years and was responsible for many of Lex's actual crimes. Alexander's corpse was then taken in by the Hall of Justice, where it was entombed. There it remained until the Blackest Night. During this event, Alexander was revived as a Black Lantern. He confronted a powerless Superboy Prime on the world of Earth Prime, a normal planet without any other superheroes, and confronted his former partner. Alexander resurrected those this version of Superboy had killed, and taunted his mentally unstable former partner, before Luthor and the other Black Lanterns he created were destroyed by Superboy. During the events of Convergence, the Crisis of Infinite Earths was undone, which presumably means that Alexander Luthor was never corrupted nor killed. It is possible that somewhere out there, a more heroic version of this character still exists. Born in the impoverished neighborhood of Metropolis, known as Suicide Slum, to two abusive parents, Lex Luthor quickly grew up with a strong desire to rise above his lowly beginnings. Even as a young man, Luthor's natural intelligence, easily one of the greatest in human history, was on full display. However, his violent childhood and formidable intelligence meant the boy was forever lonely. He only ever had one friend, a fellow student named Perry White. Though Perry encouraged Luthor to rise up and find a way out of the slums, a darkness began to take hold in the young Lex Luthor, who even his friend couldn't prevent from taking root. Luthor became profoundly ambitious and vindictive, setting up his own gang in the slum to protect himself against bullies, while displaying a deeply misogynistic attitude to the girls at his school. In his teenage years, Luthor engineered the death of his parents by sabotaging the family car. Luthor was then taken in by a foster family, which turned out to be even more abusive, though he did become close to his foster sister Lena until she was killed by her father. This was a turning point for Luthor, who vowed to do whatever it took to get power and revenge. He used the resulting insurance payoff from his biological parents' death to found his own company, LexCorp, while decades later he would take revenge on his foster father for what he did to Lena. By the time Luthor was a fully grown adult, LexCorp had grown into an international corporation that specialized in advanced technology, famous for employing a vast array of women under Luthor's direct command. This corporation dominated daily life in Metropolis, where it was headquartered. Luthor went out of his way to buy up all local media outlets in the city, save for one stubborn holdout that would plague the industrialists for years. The Daily Planet, now run by his once close friend Perry White, that often sought to kill his former friend's newspaper out of spite. Luthor was always an unscrupulous businessman, and from the beginning of his enterprise he was never above using criminal means in his never-ending rise to power. In spite of this, he was able to preserve a positive public image by publicly engaging in a great deal of philanthropy, making him one of the most popular, powerful, and well-connected men in the city. Luthor married a total of 8 times in his life, fathering a daughter with one of them that he named Lena, after both his deceased foster sister and his aunt. None of these marriages lasted or ended well, and Luthor largely lived his life alone. he became intent on one day making intrepid reporter for the Daily Planet, a woman named Lois Lane, his 9th wife. It was under these circumstances that Superman finally arrived at Metropolis. Curious about this strange new being that was protecting the city, Luthor allowed an attack on himself in order to see Superman in action in person. The Superman was able to save the day, and Luthor offered to hire Superman as a bodyguard. The hero rebuffed this opportunity and instead discovered Luthor's ploy to meet Superman. The mayor deputized the Man of Steel on the spot to arrest Luthor for endangering the public, just to satisfy his own curiosity. Though this crime did not keep Luthor behind bars for very long, it had a profound effect on the man. He swore he would make Superman pay for this humiliation. This desire for revenge gradually grew into an obsession that bordered on madness. Luthor in general saw himself as a better alternative as mankind's savior, while often viewing Superman as a true, unrecognized threat. He felt he had earned everything he had, while Superman appeared to have been given these powers by random chance. Because of this, Luthor began a slew of schemes in order to defeat Superman. Luthor discovered kryptonite was a weakness of Superman's that would prove useful over the years in Lex's many schemes to defeat the hero. Luthor failed at these schemes time and time again, though thanks to the vast resources and network Luthor had carefully cultivated, he remained an ever-present threat. Even if Superman was able to get the man incarcerated, he often commanded a formidable deal of power and influence behind bars, while it was often difficult to actually secure any conviction, because Superman would have to reveal his secret identity in order to testify in court. But Luthor's obsession did not come without a cost. Persistent use of kryptonite, often in reckless and dangerous ways, such as exposing himself directly to the substance using a ring Luthor had fashioned, left the man with cancer. The hand which wore the kryptonite ring had been so badly damaged by its radiation that he had to get it amputated and replaced with a cybernetic copy. The rest of Luthor's body rapidly decayed to the extent that the man faked his own death and had his mind transferred into a new cloned body. Setting himself up as his own heir, Luthor was able to effortlessly transfer his wealth and power back onto himself, while also avoiding suspicion about all of this from the public and even Superman by convincing the world that he was literally a different man. A distant relative from Luthor, but otherwise a completely distinct person. To facilitate this illusion, Luthor adopted a fake accent and grew his hair out. He began working with a clone of Supergirl to protect Metropolis while they started a relationship together, again to make it seem as though he was a different person with different goals. Not long after this, a powerful being known as Doomsday attacked Metropolis. Though Supergirl was eager to assist, Luthor persuaded her to stay back and protect the city. Lex genuinely believed Superman was in no real danger. After all, if he couldn't kill Superman, certainly a mindless monster would have no chance. But this assumption proved gravely incorrect, and Superman died stopping this powerful villain. Privately, Luthor was enraged, feeling cheated of his own eventual victory over his longtime enemy that he felt he deserved. Lex entered into a depressed state because of this. He even tried to clone a new version of Superman, inadvertently creating Superboy, while Luthor also tried to recruit a couple of the other new Supermen that had emerged in the wake of the original's death. The clone was created using half of Luthor's DNA and half of Superman's, but it gained independence and did not follow Luthor the way Lex had hoped. Nevertheless, Luthor always had a lot of affection for this clone, apparently viewing him as a sort of son and quietly following Superboy's life and career in the years to come. The Man of Steel eventually did return to life, but Luthor's new comfortable position was threatened by Lois Lane, who discovered he was a clone of the original villain. Lex does ruthlessly attacked Lois over this, systematically trying to destroy her career, but thanks to the help of Superman, Lois was able to get the truth out to the public just the same. Exposed, Luthor was forced into a last desperate stand against Superman, knowing his public image was ruined, and he wouldn't be able to reverse the damage Lois had done as easily as he had in the past encounters. While due to a genetic flaw, his cloned body began to rapidly deteriorate. In response to this, a desperate Luthor triggered a failsafe in LexCorp, a barrage of missiles that almost completely destroyed the city. Thousands were killed, and Luthor's broken, cloned body was left permanently paralyzed. As always, Luthor swore revenge on Superman, who he blamed for all of this. Luthor only managed to escape this fate by selling his soul to a demon named Neuron. This being restored Luthor's body to perfect health, while Lex turned himself in to the authorities at a rebuilt Metropolis. Luthor managed to get away with all the crimes associated with him by pinning the entire matter on his clone, claiming to have been kidnapped by a group of insane scientists who created Lex's clone, which in turn is the one who attacked Metropolis. As a result, Luthor was essentially, once again, given a clean slate, able to take advantage of a new, restored, positive public image, one that he had carefully cultivated before things had gotten out of control. He started to truly play up his humanitarian angle, upgrading the rebuilt Metropolis and rebuilding much of Gotham City after it suffered a brutal earthquake and was left largely abandoned by the American government. Luthor was also vital in working with the Justice League to restore the sun when an entity threatened to consume it. Luthor rapidly began to rise as a popular alternative to the current administration. Luthor launched a campaign to become the next president of the United States. Though there were plenty of examples of Luthor's villainy in the public record, the disastrous handling of the Gotham City earthquake and the failed attempts to rebuild the city left the previous administration in a deeply unpopular position, while Luthor seemingly looked like the hero of that particular story. In spite of concerns from the superhero community, Lex initially functioned quite well as president. He built stronger bonds between America and the nations of Atlantis and Russia, and proved a capable leader during the invasion from a powerful being known as Imperiex. Secretly, however, Luthor was as much a villain as ever. He forged ties with the new god Darkseid and his world of Apocalypse in order to combat the alien threat of Imperiex. In exchange for Darkseid's help, Luthor gave the monstrous Doomsday over to the new god, for use in Darkseid's own nefarious purposes. In spite of all his newfound power, Luthor was still unable to target Superman, knowing the Man of Steel was simply too popular for him to attack directly. He did manage to use his considerable resources to discover something few others knew though, that Clark Kent is Superman. Luthor had discovered evidence of this long ago but denied it, convinced that a being like Superman would never sink so low as to live the ordinary life of Clark Kent. Luthor elected to keep this discovery a secret, even murdering a scientist to cover the truth up. He did use this new information in a small way, though, leaving Kansas unprotected during the Imperiex invasion. Manchester Black then attacked Superman's friends and family in his own private vendetta, and Luthor, surprisingly, stepped in to defend the Man of Steel. Luthor explained that he had kept Superman's identity a secret and helped out for two reasons. One, he had become nostalgic about their long-standing feud, and two, because the truth of Superman's identity would endanger Lois, just about the only person Luthor actually had any care for in this world. Manchester Black was defeated because of this, but in revenge for Luthor's meddling, he erased all knowledge of Clark's identity in Luthor's mind before the telepath killed himself. When Batman discovered it was Luthor, rather than the previous administration responsible for many of the problems in rebuilding Gotham, Bruce Wayne publicly severed all ties with LexCorp and the current administration. In turn, Luthor had Batman's lover, Vesper Fairchild, killed, and he framed Bruce Wayne for her murder. Later, an asteroid made of kryptonite was found heading towards Earth, and Luthor decided to seize the opportunity to target Superman directly. Lex attempted to use the asteroid to rally the public against his old enemy, sending a number of superheroes to arrest Superman. Luthor was growing arrogant and didn't make a strong case to the public about why Superman was somehow responsible for the asteroid. Thus he began to draw more and more suspicion on himself, especially after trying to trick Batman into killing Metallo. When this too failed, Luthor became desperate, sure that the world's finest superheroes were on the verge of defeating his presidency. Donning a suit powered by technology from Apocalypse, and using an enhanced version of a powerful drug known as Venom, Luthor attacked Superman directly. In making such a brazen attack, Luthor had badly overplayed his hand. Half insane from the venom, Luthor began ranting and inadvertently confessing to a number of crimes he had committed as president. Most importantly, the secret deals he made with Darkseid. Batman managed to record and broadcast this rant, and this, coupled with the revelation that acting CEO of LexCorp, Talia Head, had sold all company assets to the Wayne Enterprises, caused Luthor to outright flee the office of the presidency and go underground. His position was turned over to Luthor's vice president, Pete Ross, though he too resigned not long after this. Lex went deep underground, avoiding the public eye and carefully planning his next move, now lacking any of the public goodwill, resources, and riches he had once enjoyed. Luthor learned of an upcoming multiversal crisis. An alternate version of Lex Luthor, named Alexander Luthor Jr., had appeared on Earth and began enacting his own plans while posing as Lex Luthor. This presented a problem to the real Luthor on two fronts. One, it was a massive affront to the man's ego, and two, it was interfering with Lex's own plans. Alexander's scheme involved an attempt to restore the multiverse after it was destroyed years ago by the Anti-Monitor. Alexander, posing as Lex, recreated the Society of Supervillains into a massive organization and attacked the Justice League as part of his plan. Lex, on the other hand, took on the identity of Mockingbird and formed the Secret Six, in an attempt to work against Alexander. Lex confronted his impersonator after months of tailing the man, but Luthor was defeated with the help of Alexander's powerful ally, Superboy Prime. Because of this, Luthor chose to subtly inform the heroes of what Alexander was planning through Superboy of his world, not realizing that in doing so, he essentially doomed his own clone. Luthor later visited Superboy's memorial in Metropolis, and seemingly regretting his role in the boy's death. Superboy Prime was defeated, and Alexander was left depowered. Lex was able to track this man down, accompanied by the Joker, who Alexander had left out of his plans out of fear of the Joker's unpredictability. The Joker, incensed at having been left out of all the fun, brutally attacked Alexander, while Luthor kept the corpse. He used it as evidence to once again pin his crimes on another Lex Luthor body, and once again clear his name. However, the event had altered reality, including the origins of Lex Luthor himself. The Luthor family, previously poor and inconsequential until Lex Luthor's rise to power, was suddenly a family with a long and powerful history in Metropolis. The family fortune was wiped out by Lex's time, and Luthor was raised by an alcoholic and abusive father named Lionel Luthor. Though Lex never cared much for his parents, he did still have a lot of affection for his now biological sister Lena, who he loved deeply. Lex eventually left Smallville after he arranged for his father's murder, leaving his sister behind in Smallville with their aunt. The details of Luthor's first encounter with Superman was also changed, now including the creation of a number of villains that would plague the Man of Steel for years: Parasite, a failed attempt at a Superman clone named Bizarro, and the cyborg Metallo. Following the events of the Infinite Crisis, Luthor found himself in a metropolis without Superman, as the event left his enemy depowered for a full year. Luthor took the opportunity to launch the Everyman Project, a massive effort to bring superpowers to ordinary citizens. He created a team of superheroes out of this he called Infinity Incorporated, and they began to operate as superheroes, though ones Luthor secretly had complete control over. To demonstrate this, he shut off the powers of one of his agents in the middle of a fight, resulting in their death. This program began gaining a lot of popularity as many sought out powers of their own, and Luthor was all too eager to accommodate them. As a hero named Supernova began gaining popularity, Luthor decided to use the Everyman Project to discredit the hero, triggering a massive shutdown of all powered individuals except the members of Infinity Incorporated. Many flying superheroes fell to their deaths as they lost their abilities mid-air, and the incident caused multiple gas lines to explode, killing even more people. Luthor's scheme was discovered by John Henry Irons and his niece Natasha. In response, Luthor attacked the two, demonstrating he had given himself a full power set reminiscent of Superman. The two managed to defeat Luthor just the same and exposed his crimes, ultimately leading to the man's arrest. Lex was tried with over 120 different criminal charges for this, ranging from malfeasance to first-degree murder, and his public reputation was ruined once again. Worse still, the villain Dr. Sivana had bought out the rebuilt LexCorp. Lex partially blamed Clark Kent for writing a series of articles detailing the true extent of his crimes. And when angrily confronted by the people of Metropolis during his trial, Luthor swore revenge on the entire city. In spite of all of this, Luthor still somehow managed to go free thanks to very expensive lawyers. But he found himself shut out of his own company, now run by Lotta Lang. Luthor responded by building a battleship made entirely out of kryptonite and powered by a special crystal, But once again, he was defeated by a returned Superman. The Man of Steel pointed out, in spite of the fact the hero was depowered for an entire year, Luthor accomplished nothing but getting a bunch of people killed, in spite of his repeated claims that Superman is the reason Lex hasn't done more for humanity. Undeterred, Lex launched a series of attacks on Superman, including the use of Bizarro and a new version of the Injustice League, though these schemes once again failed. Later, when General Zod with an army of Kryptonians invaded Earth, Luthor formed a new version of the Superman Revenge Squad. This new version of the team included Superman himself, simply because Lex wanted the Man of Steel around to witness the dangers he had preached of Kryptonians firsthand. This invasion was successfully stopped. Later, Luthor was co-opted into working for Darkseid along with another iteration of the Secret Society of Supervillains. Luthor was actually working as a mole for the heroes during this, and with Dr. Savannah, managed to strike a serious blow against the invading new god. Luthor and Superman teamed up to defeat Darkseid's forces and was a vital part in defeating the villain. In spite of all of this, he was finally imprisoned for his many crimes. Lex was placed under the custody of General Sam Lane, Lois's father, who put Luthor's intellect to use while he was imprisoned. Luthor managed to interact with a captured Brainiac in order to escape. Now free, he learned that his clone was resurrected and met the boy in person in Smallville, before deciding that the now-named Connor Kent was a failure, and distanced himself from the young man once and for all. During the Blackest Night, Luthor holed himself up in a special safe house, correctly reasoning there would be a lot of dead people returned to life, eager to seek revenge on him. The Black Lanterns, including Lionel Luthor, managed to break into the safe house just the same. Luthor was only saved by a copy of the Orange Ring of Avarice, as Luthor was recognized by the ring as a particularly strong form of greed on Earth. As an Orange Lantern, Luthor proved a powerful adversary against the invading Black Lanterns, but he quickly comes into conflict with the owner of the original copy of the ring, Larfleeze. The power of greed made both of them not willing to share the power with each other, and in spite of being surrounded by dangerous Black Lanterns, the two began to battle. Luthor soon became overwhelmed by his ring's feelings of greed, attacking everyone around him and trying to steal the other power rings for himself, before the Orange Ring was finally taken away from him by Larfleeze at the end of Blackest Night. However, the ring's powerful influence had an effect on the villain, and he became obsessed with gaining a ring, either orange or black, for himself. In this quest, Luthor managed to not only trick and defeat Brainiac, but also learn the full story of Superman's life. Luthor was utterly broken by the knowledge that Superman was raised by humans in a loving home that Lex never had, only for him to disappear into a portal leading him into the Phantom Zone. This version of Luthor was never heard from again, until elements of his story were remade into the merged timeline that followed Superman's rebirth. Born and raised in Smallville, Kansas, Lex Luthor lived with his ill sister, Lena. Seeing her struggling health, Luthor vowed to one day find a cure for the young girl. As he grew into adulthood, Lex moved to Metropolis, founding a company named LexCorp and gaining a reputation for being a man who can solve problems thanks to his profound intellect. Luthor also took an intense interest in alien life and technology. He managed to make contact with a sinister being called the Collector of Worlds, exchanging information about Earth for advanced technology. Lex's growing reputation as an expert in alien tech led him to be recruited into a special government program designed to investigate a mysterious new being that emerged in Metropolis, who the press had taken to calling Superman. Luthor would study a vessel found by this secret government organization that Superman was thought to arrive on Earth as an infant, as well as studying Superman himself when he was captured and tortured by this clandestine organization. Superman managed to escape with his vessel before Luthor decided to betray the group. Luthor stole a cachet of a powerful substance that was found to weaken Superman, known as kryptonite. Lex then leaked the full story of what happened to a reporter named Clark Kent, protecting himself by exposing this secret organization to the world. When the Collector of Worlds invaded and stole a portion of Metropolis, this being was defeated, but Luthor was able to escape any prosecution thanks to a lack of evidence incriminating him. Over the next few years, Luthor and his company would rapidly rise in prominence within Metropolis, granting the man a great deal of power and prestige over the city. Luthor became annoyed with Superman, who he believed was interfering with his business, and would plan a number of schemes to attack the hero over the years. Meanwhile, superheroes such as Superman rose to prominence and fame, including a team of them called the Justice League, who stopped an invasion from a powerful being called Darkseid, and in doing so, they became widely considered the guardians of this world. After about 4 years following the Justice League's formation, Luthor personally instigated an American invasion of Karat, so that he could sell powerful weaponry back to the foreign country. This put him, for the first time, in direct conflict with Superman, and Luthor was detained thanks to the Man of Steel's actions. Luthor was physically scarred because of this event and was kept in prison for a year. When Lex was finally released, he returned to his life in Metropolis, only to immediately witness the crime syndicate invading Earth in force. Though these villains from another universe declared all criminals were free to walk the Earth, had surreptitiously inserted kryptonite into Superman's brain and managed to imprison most other members of the Justice League, Luthor was unwilling to accept these invaders controlling what he viewed was his world. He activated a project he had been working on for some time, an incomplete clone of Superman he nicknamed Bizarro, and the two recruited a team of villains to oppose the crime syndicate, as well as working with one of the last members of the Justice League still standing, Batman. Together they formed a team Luthor dubbed the Injustice League and attacked the crime syndicate head-on, only for Luthor to encounter an alternate version of himself from the crime syndicate's home world named Mazahs. Mazahs' enormous power quickly overwhelmed and killed the Bizarro clone, much to Luthor's dismay. But this alternate version of Lex was no match for Luthor or his quick wits, and Lex was able to kill his counterpart, firmly ending the crime syndicate's invasion. The Justice League was freed, and Luthor personally saved Superman's life, while the Injustice League as a whole was regarded as heroes. They were all given pardons for their past crimes, and though most simply laughed the absurdity of this entire situation off, Lex seemed to really enjoy the experience of being a hero, and decided to honestly take a shot at redemption. He tried to join the Justice League but was immediately rebuffed, even after Luthor revealed he had discovered Batman's secret identity based on their time working together to fight the crime syndicate. Eventually, after the team realized Luthor was going to try and be a superhero no matter what they did, the Justice League reluctantly invited Luthor to join their roster, along with another villain seeking to redeem himself named Captain Cold. The team would work together in dealing with the power ring that had come to Earth with the crime syndicate after it joined with a woman on their Earth named Jessica Cruz, who would join the Justice League as well. Luthor was also instrumental in defeating an assassin named Neutron, a powerful being called Doomsday, and a sinister virus called the Mazahs. However, Luthor's first real challenge as a member of the Justice League came when the team was drawn into a war between the Anti-Monitor and Darkseid. Luthor and Superman were stranded on Apokolips by Lex's sister after she was exposed to a powerful piece of New Gods technology called a Mother Box, which apparently drove her insane. On this dark world, Superman was corrupted by its negative energy, to the extent the Man of Steel attacked, tortured, and abandoned Luthor on this harsh and dangerous planet. Luthor managed to survive until Darkseid was killed by the Anti-Monitor, and Lex managed to absorb a large amount of the New Gods' energy, gaining a great deal of power. He declared himself the god of Apokolips and the new Darkseid. Though Darkseid was resurrected, he and the Anti-Monitor were defeated and the war was brought to an end. Luthor managed to retain control of Apokolips in spite of losing his new powers, and he was presented with a new symbol for himself by his followers, as well as one of the very powerful Mother Boxes. Though this left Luthor stronger than ever before, he elected to leave it all behind, save for his new Mother Box. When he returned to Earth, he was surprised to learn that in his absence, Superman had passed away. He bought out the Daily Planet specifically so he could get a hold of Superman's original cape, and vowed, in honor of what was once his greatest enemy, to become the new Superman and the new guardian of Metropolis. Though Lex appeared to have been genuine in his desire to help and replace the Man of Steel, it did not sit well with another older version of Superman from an older timeline that had mysteriously vanished. This other Superman, who was married to a Lois Lane from their world and had a child together named John, had been living on this world in secret for some time. When the other Superman died and Luthor took that Superman's place, the Superman of the older timeline was unwilling to accept living in the shadows any longer. He confronted Luthor and chose to become the Superman of this world once more, though Lex was unwilling to abandon the name either. As Lex hadn't actually done anything wrong, the two agreed to a sort of truce and would occasionally even work together as heroes. This new Superman even came to Luthor's defense when he was arrested by two aliens who claim Luthor will one day become the new Darkseid, this time for good. Yet a bond of trust would never truly be built between these two superheroes. Not long after this, Luthor and all his life events were merged with the older timeline, along with all others involved in the life of Superman, due to the meddling of a fifth-dimensional imp named Mr. Mixie Spitalik. Though he still remained intent on being a hero, this seemed to bring the trust issues between Superman and Luthor to a head. And Lex chose to abandon the symbol and identity of Superman altogether, no longer interested in working with Superman or his allies. Not long after this, Luthor was recruited by Brainiac to combat beings called the Omega Titans. The experience, which was the direct result of the Justice League creating a hole in the Source Wall, an important barrier that envelops the known multiverse, led Luthor into discovering he was still heavily associated with the force of entropy, as was the Earth and humanity itself. This seemed to have a profound effect on Lex Luthor. He officially left the Justice League, having already distanced himself from the team, and appeared to have gained a new perspective on Earth and its future, viewing his time with the Justice League as ultimately meaningless. He dismantled his mother box and used the energy to travel through time, learning about the changes the hole in the Source Wall had brought to the world, and the secrets its crumbling infrastructure had unlocked. Discovering much of this information was apparently already documented by his father, Lionel Luthor, in a hidden lab located in Kansas. With these discoveries, Luthor decided to recruit a new team of villains he called the Legion of Doom. They attacked a fortress controlled by the powerful immortal known as Vandal Savage, revealing that Luthor set this whole fortress up to be the Legion of Doom's new headquarters. Luthor executed Vandal Savage on the spot, and has begun his own plans for dealing with the rapidly deteriorating Source Wall. Luthor believes this situation presents an opportunity to access forces the Source Wall previously had locked away, and specifically picked out the members of his Legion to harness these energies. He mobilized his team of villains to gain these powers for themselves, such as granting Gorilla Grodd access to the Still Force, a strange counterpart to the Speed Force, and connecting Sinestro to a new Lantern Core based on ultraviolet light. As for Luthor, he managed to take direct control of Superman's body by shrinking himself down and invading it from within, while the Joker similarly took over the hero called the Martian Manhunter. The two used these powerful bodies to make a direct approach towards the Source Wall's energy, which had found itself on Earth. This attempt to seize this power for himself failed, and Luthor and the Legion of Doom were defeated by the Justice League. In response, Luthor has been forced to seek out a new ally in order to find further answers into this mysterious new source of power. A version of Batman from a dark world, known as the Batman Who Laughs. On the world of Earth 3, part of the orrery of 52 worlds that emerged following the Flashpoint event, the Crime Syndicate, a series of villains and evil versions of Earth Zero's Justice League, took over the world. Though most heroes died fighting the Crime Syndicate, one was a persistent threat to the evil organization. This hero was able to kill many members of the Crime Syndicate in the years he spent fighting them, including the villains Hawkwing as well as Will Bastion, also known as Mazahs. From each of these villains, Luthor was able to gain their powers, including Mazahs' incredible magical abilities granted by the gods whenever he utters his own name. Alexander was eventually kidnapped by the Crime Syndicate and brought to Earth Zero as part of their invasion of the world after Earth 3 was destroyed by the Anti-Monitor. The villains carefully monitor Luthor, keeping him in the Justice League Watchtower, which the villains had seized after they trapped most of the Justice League. The villains left Alexander alive and brought him to Earth 3 because they wanted his incredible mind and knew they would need his powers to defeat the Anti-Monitor should he follow them to this world. When the Injustice League, a team formed by the Lex Luthor of Earth Zero, infiltrated the Watchtower, they inadvertently discovered and freed Alexander. He killed Crime Syndicate member Johnny Quick and absorbed his power, escaping the Watchtower and encountering Superwoman, the Lois Lane of Earth 3. They revealed to be in a relationship of sorts with one another, and that Superwoman was pregnant with Alexander's child. Mazahs then attacked the leader of the crime syndicate known as Ultraman, knocking him out before he killed and absorbed the powers of syndicate member Deathstorm. Luthor then turned on the Injustice League, reasoning they too were villains, and swore he would kill all of them before becoming Earth Zero's greatest superhero. He badly injured many of these Earth Zero inhabitants, including Deathstroke and Black Manta, before being impaled on a lightning rod by Sinestro, while Black Adam tried to use the lightning of Shazam to turn Alexander back into a human, in spite of Superwoman's efforts to stop them. However, Alexander was left unaffected by this alternate form of magic. Instead, he attacked his Earth Zero counterpart Lex Luthor, killing the Bizarro clone in the process. Just as Alexander was about to kill Lex too, the Earth Zero villain realized that they were on some fundamental level the same person, and Lex was able to call down the Mazahs lightning himself. With Alexander's powers briefly gone, Luthor stabbed Alex in the chest, covering the man's mouth to prevent the lightning from returning. Alexander Luthor died on the spot, and the Crime Syndicate's invasion with him, as his death triggered the return of the Justice League. Superwoman survived the ordeal and was imprisoned, but insisted her child would get revenge on the beings of Earth Zero. She and the rest of the Crime Syndicate were freed during the Darkseid War, because the Justice League desperately needed their help. Superwoman agreed to this, though at the height of the war, after Darkseid and the Anti-Monitor had been killed, Superwoman gave birth to her son. Darkseid's daughter Grail stole the child, incinerated Superwoman, and turned the baby into a new version of Darkseid, one unable to resist her commands. At her behest, Darkseid battled the Justice League before Grail was forced to revert the new god back into an infant form. Grail managed to escape with the baby, promising to raise and love him herself. She began hunting Olympians to use their powers to age her father back into his adult form, and in spite of the hero Wonder Woman's valiant efforts to stop them, they were able to use the power of Zeus to return Darkseid to his full power, slaying the old god of Olympus in the process. It appears that Darkseid has once again taken command of Apocalypse, and is possibly in a major war against the other new gods that live on the planet New Genesis, having slain their leader and Darkseid's greatest rival, the High Father. Across the multiverse, and in countless alternate timelines and continuities, an endless number of alternate Lex Luthors exist. Some are good and truly heroic, others every bit as devious and evil as Lex Luthor is infamous for being. A number of comics which contradict retroactive continuity concerning Alexei Luthor have been relegated to being the story of an alternate version of the character, due to the slow development of Luthor into the more modern and famous version of the villain. As such, many of the original stories featuring Alexei are no longer considered part of official canon for that particular character. Other notable versions of Lex Luthor include the man's daughter, who appeared in an alternate world that takes place in a future version of Earth that appeared in Multiversity, and versions of Lex Luthor that appeared in the stories Red Sun and Kingdom Come. Additionally, one other version of Alexander Luthor existed in something called the Anti-Monitor universe back in the days of the New Earth. Like other versions of Alexander before or since, this man was also a mortal enemy of that world's crime syndicate. Lex Luthor has also appeared in many film and television adaptations of Superman stories. Some versions are better regarded than others. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and thank you for watching my origins and bio for the 7 Lex Luthors. So this is the penultimate chapter of my series on Superman bios that I've been rolling out this year. It's been a fun little journey, but I knew this one was going to be a big whole side project since the Luthor that was Superman was for a time the amalgamated Luthor that reflected both the New Earth and New 52 continuities. Originally, I was going to just cover the two of them, but then as I was looking at the character, it felt right to just cover the whole character's history from the very beginnings in his pseudo-dictator mad scientist years all the way up into the modern, complicated character that we know today. In that time, Luthor's been a lot of things: a businessman, a politician, a supervillain, and for each of these roles, a pretty interesting one at that. The psychology of this character has been looked at over and over again at this point, under any number of different lenses. The whole point of his character is that he probably could have been this miraculous, wonderful human being that did all these great things for the human race, and though he blames Superman for it, it really has everything to do with him and what he's all about. He's selfish, greedy, and cares only about himself. He ultimately only cares about his own status and power, so he falls for these petty little quabbles every time he's given a solid opportunity. The guy became president and was a pretty good president, but basically let himself screw it all up by being willing to negotiate with villains, by getting obsessed with Batman and Superman. It's an interesting treatise on his characters, and that Public Enemy storyline is a real classic for a reason. Luthor's character was also the main feature of the event Forever Evil, and I quite enjoy that story for that very reason. Additionally, I enjoy the original Crisis of Infinite Earths, which features a few versions of Luthor in very interesting ways, including some pretty cool stuff about Alexander Luthor Jr. He would go on to play a major role in Infinite Crisis, an event that I didn't have a lot of great feelings towards, but in doing this bio, I have gained a new perspective on the whole matter. I'm not saying that story is perfect, but it's a lot like Forever Evil. These stories do a lot of crazy things, go way over the top, and it's pretty interesting because of it. It's kind of a thought experiment on Superman just going nuts and rampaging across the universe, and all this stuff having to come to play to take him down, or Alexander Luthor's crazy scheme making that multi-dimensional tuning fork thing. That's wild, and the sort of imagery that becomes unique in the world of superhero stories. And those are some of the recommendations that come to mind. I will say one aspect of this character I kind of noticed in going over this bio and kind of compiling this character's long history over many decades. The New Earth and Silver Age versions of Luthor do have a bit of a character flaw, or at least a flaw in their writing. Over time, their obsession and insistence on being Superman's enemy, in spite of the fact that they almost always fail, becomes a sort of makes these characters kind of look pathetic. It's almost pitiful after a while and near the end of both of these characters and their respective arcs. And it's something that, thankfully, the new 52/Rebirth version of the character has thus far avoided. In giving him success stories and giving him a pseudo-chance at redemption, even if it didn't ultimately work out, Luthor feels more like a robust and powerful force in the DC universe. Grant Morrison did some pretty good stuff and flirted with this idea in the earlier part of the 2000s, but I think Jeff Johns and a handful of other writers, including Scott Snyder now with his new Justice League series, has done a better job at making Luthor feel like a more cohesive threat. Dan Jurgens also is a real highlight of this character, both in the distant past when he was writing him with all that clone stuff. He did some really creative and fun things with the character during that, but also in the modern era during his time in the Rebirth series Action Comics. So I quite enjoyed the character and would recommend any of those stories that we just went through. Thanks for watching this video. It was a lot of fun to make and was a nice long one. Next up, though, is a very short one, and we'll close out the Superman origins and bios for good, at least for the immediate future. Following that, we got an interesting Patreon winner, because our patrons vote every week on upcoming videos and that sort of thing. You can find out how you can do that yourself for only $1 a month in the video description below. And finally, if you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.